In the third chapter of Souls of Black Folk, Du Bois contrasts his own goals and recommendations with those of another contemporary leader, Booker T. Washington. And this is a very short piece, but it's really useful to look at this contrast in leadership styles, to both get a kind of critical lens on Du Bois's recommendations, and also to illuminate what those are, to see what different possibilities there are and were at the beginning of the 20th century for articulating what the end, what equality for Black people would look like. So here again, it's useful to look at the audience for this essay. It was published in the Dial, which at that time was a transcendentalist journal. It later became a kind of political literary journal, but at that time it was transcendentalist. Again, this idea of transcendental, the spirit as yearning for its nature and a higher nature, and for a release from the bonds of the mundane grubbings of daily life. And so again, just by virtue of being a journal, it's going to be aimed at educated people, mostly white, and the educated middle and upper class. And so, so he's aiming to influence the sort of people who are thinking about leadership and are putting their support behind different sorts of projects. So here's his description of the reception, the mostly white reception of the proposals by Booker T. Washington. It startled the nation to hear a Negro advocating such a program after many decades of bitter complaint. It startled and won the applause of the South. It interested and won the admiration of the North. And after a confused murmur of protest, it silenced, if it did not convert the Negroes themselves. So you have the white North and the white South, thinking, oh yeah, here's Booker T. Washington. He just wants for Black people to be given the opportunity to work hard. Okay. That seems okay, as long as we don't have to do anything else. And here Du Bois is suggesting that, maybe that's not such a welcome kind of message for Black people. And so, throughout, as Du Bois is articulating his criticism, he is pointed, but also tries to be not to criticize Washington too severely. He doesn't want to give the appearance that he has no respect for Washington, or that he thinks Washington's program should not be developed. So as you read these criticisms, think about whether he is suggesting that Washington's program really is problematic, that the Black people at that time should not be happy about this, and that it really is only good for white people, or is he suggesting that his own goals should be in addition, that Washington shouldn't give up the sorts of things that Du Bois thinks are important to the advancement of people of color. So his criticisms of Washington are aimed to garner support for his own sorts of projects, and then the question is, does he really disapprove of the sorts of projects that Washington is proposing? In thinking about these different, the different ways in which leaders might advocate for equality and justice, Du Bois considers three different types of leadership, and here's how he describes this the sort of process by which leadership evolves in addressing injustice. Now, in the past, the American Negro has had instructive experience in the choosing of group leaders, founding thus a peculiar dynasty which in the light of present conditions is worthwhile studying. So that's the three types, this peculiar dynasty. When sticks and stones and beast form the sole environment of a people, their attitude is largely one of determined opposition and conquest of natural forces. So, this is sort of the early leadership style is just, whatever it takes to get food and not get eaten. But when to earth and brute is added an environment of men and ideas, then the attitude of the imprisoned group may take three main forms. So, after, just surviving, now we are in a situation of so-called civilization, and, Black people find themselves as slaves, as imprisoned. So what is what's the leadership style now? How do we deal with this situation? Three main forms: a feeling of revolt and revenge, an attempt to adjust all thought and action to the will of the greater group, or finally a determined effort at self-realization and self-development despite environing opinion. The influence of all these attitudes at various times can be traced in the history of the American Negro in the evolution of his successive leaders. So already, articulating this as evolution gives you the sense that for Du Bois, the third style is the right style, and he goes through each style then in more detail, culminating with Frederick Douglass as the exemplar of the style of self-realization and self-development. And this is also how he would characterize himself. And in contrast, he would characterize Washington's program as the second style, a style of assimilation and adjustment to white people. And he thinks that that's problematic, and that's his main criticism is the adjustment, that Washington concedes too much. And here he is describing this concession and why it's problematic. Mr. Washington represents in Negro thought the old attitude of adjustment and submission, but adjustment at such a peculiar time as to make his program unique. This is an age of unusual economic development, and Mr. Washington's program naturally takes an economic cast, becoming a gospel of work and money, to such an extent as apparently almost completely to overshadow the higher aims of life. Moreover, this is an age when the more advanced races are coming in closer contact with the less developed races, and the race feeling is therefore intensified. And Mr. Washington's program practically accepts the alleged inferiority of the Negro races. And so, you can see in this passage this contrast between the higher spirit and the lower money-grubbing qualities that Washington is advocating, and in the background is also the double consciousness. So you have a closer meeting of races, you have more opportunities where people of different races are coming together, and that is going to create more tension as well, and this sense in which being able to meet as equals is going to require something other than economic advancement. It's going to require something like education.